Welcome back to Walking with the Chosen, the podcast where we explore every episode of The Chosen, dive into biblical truths it reveals, and hear from those whose lives have been changed by it. I'm your host, Shay Keith, and on today's episode, we're going to be discussing Season 2, Episode 5, titled Spirit. In this episode, we see powerful themes of healing, spiritual warfare, personal surrender, and political tension come to a head. A disciple lays down his weapon for a greater calling, and a familiar face quietly slips away in shame. There's a lot going on beneath the surface. Let's unpack it together. News alert number 1. Have you not heard the exciting news that The Chosen Season 5 is now in theaters? And opening weekend, which was just this last weekend, opened up in 3rd place. Isn't that amazing? I'm so happy for The Chosen. They've done so much better than they expected. And so far they raised $11.5 million from around 2,200 theaters across the country. So they're off to a fantastic start. And the next release of 3 episodes is coming out starting tomorrow. And I'm going to be there, at least as when I'm recording this video. I can't wait to see it. Dallas has promised that there is going to be some answered questions, as well as his favorite scene that they are filming. So I'm curious to see what they're going to talk about in the next release of The Chosen. Anyway, I hope you have a chance to go out and see it while it's still in theaters. The first release of the first 2 episodes is going to be in theaters for at least another week because they are in 3rd place. And then the next one comes out starting tomorrow on Thursday. And then there will be one more release with the final 3 episodes the following Thursday, so April 10th. And you can watch it in your local theater and keep supporting The Chosen so we can get this spread around the world and get everybody to know about Jesus. News alert number 2. In case you missed it, you can watch a 90-minute episode of Jonathan Rumi being interviewed by Tucker Carlson on YouTube. I'll make sure to put the link in the comments. But this was a great video to watch. I watched it when I came back from Mexico a few weeks ago, and the woman sitting next to me on the plane, as soon as she saw that video pop up with Jonathan Rumi's face, she got really excited. She's like, oh my gosh, I know him. Turns out she actually knows one of the writers for The Chosen. Tyler was, he's one of the 3 writers. We got Tyler, Ryan, and of course Dallas. But Tyler went to school with her son, and she knows Tyler really well. And she has great things to say about Tyler and that he's a great Christian himself. So it's kind of cool to get to meet somebody like that who knows somebody who knows somebody. But I highly encourage you to go check out this interview because Jonathan reveals a lot about filming for the show and how it's transformed his life. And in case you haven't seen it before, you might want to go check out Jonathan and Jesus, I think it's called. Sorry, I don't have the notes right in front of me, but Amazon has a series. I think it was 4 episodes that talked about Jonathan. That came out a couple of years ago. So you might want to go look for that. And if I can find a link to it, I'll make sure to put it in the comments below as well. At least I'll give you the correct name inside the comments. Okay, so let's head into this recap so we can find out what all happened in episode 5 of season 2. The first theme that I wanted to start with is Mary. We see Mary out on the road picking fruit off of a tree, and she's trying to recite this latest scripture that was given to her by Philip. It's important to her and Rama and Matthew that they learn these scriptures. So she's studying this scripture, and she sees a Roman soldier approach. And immediately you see the fear in Mary's face. She's terrified. She doesn't know what's happening, but the PTSD obviously lives in her strong. And you know that she's reliving some of those horrible memories that she must have for how the Romans treated her. And she's afraid. She's there by herself. She doesn't know if this Roman soldier is going to try to do something to her. She tries to hide behind a tree, not very well. But she watches these 2 soldiers meet, and then they go their separate ways, and then she goes back to camp. Unfortunately, how she feels didn't just go away. She goes back to camp and she tries to help Rama with her reading lessons and learning the scriptures at the same time. And she just gets frustrated. Rama, trying to be sweet Rama, is trying to say, look, it's okay. We can do this some other time. And Mary gets defensive and she's like, no, we're going to do it now. She really is trying to keep her mind occupied so she's not thinking back about what she just witnessed and the feelings that are obviously just brought up in her as well. So Rama is like, okay, well, I guess we'll go back and I'll try to practice my letter writing while I'm trying to learn these words. And we know that Mary definitely is struggling with something. And we find out later in the episode when we see a man who's possessed by demons appear. And that really triggered something in her. She showed that she was rubbing her head when she heard the man screeching outside around their tent area. And she went to go outside when she realized what it was and confront the man. And she tried and tried. She begged the man, just tell me your real name. She really wanted him to speak truth. And I think that's something that she could relate to because, as you recall, in the first season, her name started off as Lilith because she was possessed by 7 demons. And this man, possessed by at least one demon, calls it out and starts talking to her. The demon starts talking to her like, Lilith, we know you. We know all kinds of stories about you. And she's trying to suppress those feelings. So first she's dealing with the Roman soldier and the feelings that she had seeing him. And now she's dealing with a demon. So she's dealing with the PTSD and the fear and the confusion and everything that she had to live through before Jesus found her and saved her. And she's trying to help this demon-possessed man. Just tell me your name. Just your real name. And unfortunately, he's not able to help her. And in fact, he launches at her. And that's when we see Simon get introduced to the group. And at the end of the scene, we see Mary quietly grab her bag and head off. And she's out of there. She's had too much to deal with. And what does she do? She goes back to her old way of life. You see her head back to a town and she heads down so she can play some poker or some sort of gambling. Obviously, it's probably not poker. But she's heading off to go do some sort of gambling and she wants to earn some money and she's got some money with her, which I'm kind of curious, like why does she have her own money? Because weren't they doing everything as a group? I digress. Anyway, she has money and she goes back to that group and we know that Mary is not headed for a good place. She has walked away from Jesus. She has walked away from the other people that she knows and loves, and she's going back to what she was comfortable with before, which that might seem kind of hard to grasp. Like, why would she go backwards to something that's not good? It's not Jesus. But just remember, she went through a lot and she's still fairly new as a believer. And sometimes it's hard to be a believer. Sometimes you might think it's easier to go back and be what you used to be until you hang out there for a while and realize I'm not that person anymore. But we'll save that for the next episode when there's more to uncover about Mary and what she goes through. The other big theme that we see is watching Shmuel and Yanni deal with politics with the Sanhedrin. They are trying to find a way to get a lot of attention on Jesus. They want the powers that be to pay attention and call him out for his blasphemy and for him doing healings on Sabbath. And they're just so sure they have a case. But when they go to discuss a prior case that Shmuel had opened, he found out that it had already been closed by none other than Nicodemus. And Nicodemus, if you remember from season 1, he obviously trusted Jesus. He believed in Jesus. He didn't follow him with the other disciples, but I'm sure his heart at least was following Jesus in the right way. When Shmuel filed his report from what he saw take place back in season 1 when Jesus healed the paralytic, he filed that case and Nicodemus has now shut it down. So now Shmuel's like, now what do I do? I have no options. I don't have that case that I can reopen because the man already told him, you're not going to reopen this case. It's a done deal. But Yanni comes up with his own plan and he realizes that they could go back and kind of stir up a mess, i.e. politics, by going after Shammai and Shimon and Hillel and all these crazy names that they throw at you. Now, this was a very big scene, and I've watched this scene so many times, and I really had to just slow it down, break it apart, and try to understand who all of these players are that they're talking about as far as the temple is concerned, and the leaders of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all those guys. So let me see if I can help you guys know what they're talking about. Now, if you're somebody who's been watching The Chosen all the way up through season 5, you probably know these people a lot better by now. But in this scene, it's a little bit confusing. So we hear Yanni talking about Hillel versus Shammai. There are two schools of thought. You have one who is a little bit more sympathetic with the people. They realize that there are a lot of laws that are hard to follow, and maybe the Pharisees need to soften their laws. And we're talking about man-made laws, not God's laws, but man-made laws that the Pharisees created. And maybe they need to be a little bit more empathetic. Whereas the other person is more about the rules and the regulations and every law that's created. So you have these two opposing forces. And Yanni knows that if he can get in there and try to stir up some trouble, then maybe they can get Nicodemus to change his opinion and maybe reopen the case, because now there's a lot of people paying attention to it. When you're talking about politics, people always want to come out on top. They want to be the leader. In order to be a leader, you have to have followers and you have to get people on your side. And that's all important to these guys, and that's how they're going to angle this whole process. So at the very top, we have Caiaphas. So he's the leader out of everybody at the Sanhedrin. You have Hillel and Shammai. So now we've got Caiaphas, Hillel, and Shammai. And then whenever there is an issue that's presented to the Sanhedrin that could be interpreted two ways, well, the court splits. And when it splits, then it becomes political. And if you can appeal to the emotional side of everything, as Yanni calls it, it's political gold. Shmuel believes the false prophecy is of utmost importance, but Yanni is saying that's only important to Shmuel. If they can tie in that emotional piece, maybe they can get Nicodemus to change his mind. Most of the Sanhedrin members follow Shammai. He is the most rigid interpreter of the doctrine. But Hillel is the one that's the more tolerant. He's the more empathetic. He's the one that really wants to try to help the people and not be all about the rules. So Yanni's plan is to write a letter to his buddy who works for Shimon, and then let him put a bug in Shimon's ear at the appropriate time, so that maybe then they can bring this up and get some leverage behind it, get that emotion going, and get the court to split. That's what they're after. They're trying to cause a ruckus. And do we see that in politics today, maybe? Just maybe. We always get those people that are stirring the pot, trying to cause a division between people. Well, these guys have got it figured out, and that's what they're working on. The unfortunate thing is you have these two Pharisees that are just so bent on getting Jesus that they can't see the man that was standing in front of them, Jesse, who was paralyzed for 38 years, and he's up and walking around. He didn't have to go to physical therapy and get his legs working again. He didn't have to spend weeks trying to figure out how to walk. No, the man just got up and walked. And not only that, he's jumping around and he's excited. And it reminds me of Forrest Gump and Lieutenant Dan. Lieutenant Dan, you've got new legs. Well, Jesse's got new legs. And so he's excited and he's up and jumping around, and they want him to calm down. And unfortunately, they miss that. They don't even appreciate that. It's a miracle. And instead, you're worried about the rules because he was healed on the Sabbath. So we know that a lot of these rules were created by the Sadducees and the Pharisees and the whole guys running the whole Sanhedrin. It's all about them, and they're not paying attention to the miracles and the wonders that Jesus is doing, and of course his teachings. They don't even listen to him in that regard either. The third theme of this episode is Simon the Zealot. We met Simon in the last episode when his brother Jesse was healed by Jesus. But now Simon is on his own path to find Jesus. He's a zealot. He had been looking for the Messiah his entire life. That's what he was trained to do, was to honor and love God. In his mind, there's no Lord but God. And he knows that God must have something to do with the fact that his brother is now healed after 38 years. He just saw his brother a day before, earlier the same day, and later that day, he's healed and up walking around. And he said in last episode that he knew that if his brother was up walking around, he knew the Messiah was with him. So Simon wants to find Jesus, and he goes out on a hunt, and he comes across the man, Caleb, who is possessed by a demon. And the man wants him to kill him, like, just kill me. I don't want to live with this demon anymore. But Simon says, no, I'm not going to do that. You're obviously in control of the demon, and the demon will pass through you to somebody else. So I'm not going to kill you. And he just walks away. And the one thing that's very curious is every time we see this man, he keeps talking about the smell. Like, that smell, it's on you. And Simon just brushes it off like, well, I saw my brother and he was laying in his own mess. So yeah, I smell. But that's not the smell that man is referring to. The smell the man's referring to is the demon inside him is like that clean, pure smell of Jesus is what he doesn't like. And you see it again when he confronts Mary and all the other disciples that are there at that campground. Sorry, I guess that's modern age. But in that camping area that they are in, Caleb, he calls it out and he's like, I could smell it on all of you. So the smell he's referring to is just that purity smell of Jesus. And he's well aware of who it is. So Simon is letting this guy go and he's not going to mess with him. Meanwhile, Simon, he's on his path to meet Jesus. And we also have Atticus, the cohorte urbane, that is chasing him as well. Because why on earth did he not go through with his mission as a zealot to kill this Roman leader in the last episode? That's got to be making Atticus' mind just go, what is going on here? And so he's following Simon around. And Simon finally catches up with the disciples when he hears again that Caleb, the demon-possessed man, is about ready to attack Mary. So Simon jumps into action, grabs his Sika dagger, and in case you're wondering, when he says that on The Chosen, it sounds like his secret dagger. It's S-I-C-A, Sika dagger is what he's saying, just so you know. And he grabs that Sika dagger, and he's about ready to do something. But I think maybe he needs to go back to cop school, because I think the number one thing a cop would do is don't ever take your eye off of the criminal or the person doing whatever wrong. And what do we see Simon do? For some reason, he decides to look over his shoulder back at the disciple standing, and that's when the guy charges him. And he gets on top of him. He's trying to choke Simon and try to kill him. And all of a sudden, here comes Jesus with Simon and John the Baptist, and they come up and he's like, out of him! And immediately the man collapses on top of Simon. Simon scrabbles out of the way, and the man just lays there for a little bit. And Jesus walks up to him and he says, it's okay. It's over. It's done with. And that's when we see Mary quietly saunter off in the background. And Simon's standing there, and after Jesus takes care of Caleb for a little bit and makes sure he's okay, John the Baptist walks over and he says, where'd you get the zealot? He seems excited. Like, you have a zealot that's following you around now? So Simon and Jesus start having a little bit of conversation, and there's a little bit of who's on first, what's on second between the two Simons, and Jesus stops that right away. Like, we're not going there. You're both named Simon, okay? And from there, we see that Simon is just overwhelmed. He finally gets to see Jesus, and he's like, are you and he goes, I am. Are you the Messiah? Yes, I am. Okay, follow me. So they go off and have their own private conversation. And it's kind of cool because you see them talking. And Simon is like, why would you do what you did? Why did you heal my brother? And Jesus says, well, I was trying to get you. I'm like, wait, what? You healed my brother to get my attention? Isn't that crazy? And then he's like, okay, but why do you need me? And Jesus says, I don't. I just want you. So Simon's thinking about this, going, okay, I'm a zealot. I'm trained to kill people until the Messiah comes. The Messiah is here. Why do you need me? Jesus says, no, I want you. And then Jesus wants to see his Sika dagger. And what does he do? He chucks it into the river. And I love his line. He says, didn't see that one coming. And the look on Simon's face, like, okay, I don't know what's happening here. But basically, it's like Jesus saying, follow me and trust me. You do not need that weapon anymore. What I'm going to teach you is enough. So they have this conversation, and now we know that Simon is going to join up with Jesus and the other disciples. Now, the final theme of the show is John the Baptist. I've already mentioned him, that he was in the prior scene with Simon and Caleb, the man who was possessed. And we see that John, he's that crazy guy living out in the wilderness, and If you read about him in the Bible, you know that he eats locusts and honey, and he wears fur skins on his body, which they kind of depicted him. And I have a little side note here. The first time I met the actor who plays John the Baptist was at Chosen Con in 2023. I guess it was the first Chosen Con down in Texas. He was one of the first people I met. It was late at night, and he was with the actor who plays Thaddeus. And they were downstairs buying something to drink when I just happened to go down there and buy something to drink as well. And I have this short little conversation. I said, it's so funny looking at you because you look so different. I don't recognize, or I think I said, you look so strange because I don't recognize you. And he goes, I don't have my costume on and now I look strange. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I'm used to you looking that way and now you're normal. Super nice guy. Liked him a lot. And I'm curious if he's going to be in season 5 or season 6 at all, because you never know. They could always have a storyline and just bring up John the Baptist, maybe like when Jesus got baptized. I keep hoping they'll do that. I think that'd be cool to go back in time and see it. Anyway, I digress. I don't know what happens with season 5. My episode already came out first, and I wasn't in it. Just gonna leave that there. But back to John the Baptist. So we know that John the Baptist is on a mission. He talks to Jesus. He tries to, like, when are you going to come out and start sharing your preaching? And when are you going to do all these great things? I've heard a little bit about the miracles that you've done, but when are you going to actually start sharing everything? So they have a great bonding moment. And I have seen some talks years ago about Dallas when he was discussing this episode and how would John the Baptist talk to his cousin Jesus, because it's a little confusing in the Bible, even when you read about it, because it sounds like John didn't necessarily know if Jesus was the one that they were expecting. That comes out in season 3, I believe, when that conversation happens. So it's like, he's your cousin. You leapt in your mom's belly when Jesus showed up in his mom's belly. So I don't know. I guess it's a little vague. And Dallas did the best he could with that information to create the storyline of these two cousins and how they might interact with each other. And it's a really sweet scene. And we hear that John's ready to go after Herod and Herodias because of their crazy matrimony situation. Herod left his wife so that he could marry his brother's former wife, Herodias. And he's like, that's just crazy. That's adultery all the way around. We don't need this craziness going on. So I'm going to go and I'm going to confront them. So he's heading back to Jerusalem and he's on a mission. And you see Jesus watching his cousin walk off while he's still standing there with Simon. And you could tell he's just choking back. It's like, he knows exactly what's going to happen to his cousin. And yet he can't tell him. So he's just watching him walk off and he's sad about what he's about to go through, what his cousin's about to go through. And it's just a really true moment. Like, how would you feel if you knew your cousin was about to do something that was going to cost them their life, but you knew they were doing what God asked them to do, so you just stand there and watch it happen, right? And of course, Jesus was God and man, so he knows everything that's going to happen, and he just watches. What a hard moment. But Jonathan Rumi does such a great job of just sharing those feelings with us so that we feel how they are when they all separate. So that is all the themes from this episode. I think it's a great show, and I love the storyline behind it. And I saw that when I was watching this episode recently, and I can't tell you how many times I've watched it before I did this recording. I watched it before I went on my trip. I watched it when I came back from the trip. And this little pre-made video pops up with Dallas, and he said this was one of their most controversial episodes they ever did. And he didn't say why. I don't know if it's because of the demon-possessed person. I don't know if it's because of how... I do know what it is. I just realized this. I saw this today in Facebook, actually. What people don't like is at the end of the episode, we see Jesus talking, and we know Mary's ran off. And so Peter and Matthew show up to talk to Jesus about Mary disappeared. But what was Jesus doing before they showed up? He was standing there practicing his Sermon on the Mount. And it's like he was kind of playing it over in his head. He goes, no, that's not right. That's not what I want to say. That is a controversial moment. People don't like the fact that Dallas has a fictional-based show about Jesus, and Jesus is contemplating how he wants to say something to a group of people. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there when Jesus came up with his Sermon on the Mount speech. Maybe he was pondering different ideas. But I know that's just one of the big arguments that people don't like. So that must be the controversial moment from episode 5. And we'll have to wait until the last episode of season 2 to hear part of the Sermon on the Mount. carried into episode 1 of season 3 when he really dives into the Sermon on the Mount speech itself. So it's great, and we'll keep that for a future episode when I come back with Walking with the Chosen. But that's all for this particular episode. And I just wanted to remind you that if you wanted to look up any of the Bible verses from today's episode, you can look up John 5, 8, and 9. Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And that was regarding Jesse in the story. Obviously, Jesse's name is a fictional name that Dallas put to it. And then we have Isaiah 43:1, which we also saw in the first episode of season 1 with Mary. "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine." And finally, Matthew 16, verse 24. "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross." And what did Simon do? He denied his zealot ways, and he's following Jesus. Don't know if he's got a cross to carry just yet, but at least we know that he is giving up his past to follow Jesus. Some things you might want to consider after watching this episode. Have you ever been so focused on being right that you missed the miracle? Are you carrying shame like Mary? What would it take for you to lay that down? What is your dagger, the thing you need to surrender to Jesus? How do you respond when God's timing is not yours? And as I'm saying that, this is something I've been dealing with a lot lately, so I feel like that question is directed at me as much as to anybody who might be watching or listening to this episode. God's timing. What is that hard? I have a picture hanging up behind me on the wall. It says, "Pray, wait, trust." And for me, waiting is the hard thing. So what are you waiting on? How do you respond when God's timing doesn't match yours? If you would like to be in touch with me and other people who are chosen followers, obviously some wonderful Christians, you can come join us over in the Walking with the Chosen Facebook group. We'd love to have you there. Just go to facebook.com/groups/Walking with the Chosen. I try to release information on a timely basis, whether it has something to do with Dallas and something he's sharing about the show, or anything I find out about the show, as well as when my latest episode is released, because sometimes it doesn't happen on the regular schedule that I think it's going to, though I'm really trying this year to do better about that. But I would love to have you in the group and ask your questions and let the group help answer. Maybe one of these questions that I just read to you stands out and you want to have an open discussion about it. Come to the group and share your concerns or your thoughts, and let's have a discussion. Thank you so much for being here. I know you have lots of opportunities to listen to many other podcasts, but I really appreciate you all being here and walking with the chosen with me. This week, take what you've heard and share it with somebody who needs to know about Jesus. Pray, reflect, and grow closer to him. Let's keep walking together one step closer to Jesus. See you in the next episode.